Yeah, left, right, out. Once again, I'm doing something a little different, and I've been meaning to do this when I first saw the movie, and I just keep putting it off and off, and finally, I'm just like, well, I better get it done. And that is a review of the movie Maverick Top Gun. I seen it, a number of weeks ago, and now I think it's hit. I think it's in the top three ever. It's well over 600 million, and they did this all without really capitulating to the Chinese market, which that's pretty amazing, considering the environment that Hollywood's been operating in the last few years. Actually, the last number of years since like Red Dawn. If you remember that, they actually changed that entire movie to take out the bad guys and change them into the North Koreans instead of having them as the Chinese Red Chinese. Anyway, here's my background a little bit. I'll give you just a little spiel. It's just part of my background, I guess. Well, when I was enlisted in the Marine Corps, I worked in the aviation side of things. I worked as a avionics and ComNav tech for consolidated automated support systems. It's like a big computer thing. So I did I and O level maintenance for F-18s. I was also a plane captain, and I worked in power plants and deployed with F-18 squadrons. So I have a lot of knowledge when it comes to when they were using that platform of the FA-18 in the movie, which is amazing. But that's besides the point. Really, the movie itself is just amazing. Just give a bird's eye view real quick. The movie, it's Maverick back, from the original Top Gun. If you haven't seen that, you see that too. It's a good 80s, blast 'em movie, pro-American. So Tom Cruise almost brought that those same aspects to this movie in 2022, which is unseen and one of the reasons it's doing so well. So it's the movie's set. He's still in the service. He's still in the Navy. At maybe not at the rank that he should be from his peers. And I guess we'll take our first little side note off that, and that's to delve into that aspect of it in reality. Well, actually, let me finish this real quickly, just in case you just want to know if is the movie good or not. Anyway, so he gets tapped to go back to Top Gun as an instructor because there's a special mission, or not, I wouldn't say, well, yeah, there's a special mission that has to be completed, some kind of enrichment. And when I first saw the movie, the thing that popped up was Iranians. That's what I thought. They're not really, they don't explicitly go out and say that, but to me, that was kind of what was implied, bearing, current world events. And he has to train these guys that were, former Top Gun, whatever pilots there, and how to do this mission utilizing the FA-18 attack, to complete this thing. Even though they, and the reason being, I believe in the movie, is they couldn't really get the F-35 or an F-22. Was more of the naval operators would be using an F-35. That's they actually have a version that's for the Marine Corps or the Navy and Marine Corps both operate one that has the capabilities of being launched off a carrier, and then the Marine Corps also has the short takeoff version as well. But anyway, so instead of that, I can't remember what the excuse was, but they needed to use more of a different platform, so they went with the FA-18. Reason being, in the movie, is they were able to get really good footage of stuff with the FA-18. And what makes this movie unique, and it is that footage, is because it's real cockpit footage. The actors were really in there. I believe they were probably in training FA-18s, because there's two-seater versions. If you take out like the because these were, I believe, they're FA-18s. They weren't the Super Hornets. Super Hornets, they do have a two-seater. At least when I was in there, it was a two-seater, and you have a Wizzo, or it's like a weapons officer, as well as a pilot. And then the regular attack F-18 is a single-seater. And then if you had the training version, if you were having to be like in North Island or something, or they call it, I believe it's 101, that's a training squadron, you would have the Bravo and Delta version. I think that's it. They're the two-seater ones that you train. You start off training with the FA-18. I'm a little rusty. This is like, I got out of that job in 2009. So, been a while. But anyway, so the footage is, by camera inside these cockpits, and you can go how the movie's made is pretty interesting how they were doing that. So all that dynamic of the movie when they're doing these cool maneuvers, they're inside the cockpit, the acting and everything. That's all real footage from within the cockpit, and that's what's incredible about this movie too. And they did a really good job of really melding that into an actual movie, because you can look at some of this stuff and online and see some cockpit footage. But anyway, so they did a really good job of that. And these actors, in this particular movie especially, you got to give these actors credits because they put their credibility out there. They went it and they did that because it's not an easy feat to be in a cockpit of an F-18 doing some G's on there, and putting yourself through that. So, and being exposed to certain things, like I heard the one guy that played Goose's son got exposed to JP. You can use GP5, GP8, or whatever the fuel, but he was jet fuel, and anyway, it was pretty enlightening to see the trials that those actors went through to produce this movie. Anyway, excellent footage. Storyline, I don't want to give it too much away, even though it's already, who hasn't seen this movie at this point. But the realism is pretty incredible. I'll just say this: there's a few things I did want to point out that'd be unique, as opposed to listening to somebody else talk about how good this movie is. One, it's to me, what struck me was like, hey, this is like the same kind of storyline as the old one, which made it great. Which it had that '80s movie. There was a kind of the protagonist, the Tom Cruise type, kind of bucking the system or whatnot, but he's an honorable dude trying to do the right thing, trying to innovate, trying to do things. He has a love interest. There's like a moment of real trial and a tribulation period, and then just a coming together and then getting things done. Now, the last scene in the movie, I will say and this is where it's like unrealistic, but it's incredible at the same time, is where they have the homage to the old F-14 Tomcat. And since you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, I don't want to give too much away. But granted, we know that's unrealistic, but it was still cool. It was still very like, when times of struggle and you adapt and overcome and you do what needs to be done to complete the mission, and plus getting into that situation was a very honorable act, paying respect to somebody after a little bit of a strife. So that was really great. I say that because I don't want to give away some of the scenes. So I want to go back and we'll touch on a couple things here on this movie that's a little unique, or my perspective, not just that. But okay, so we go back to Tom Cruise. He's in the beginning of the movie. He's working on some kind of advanced aeronautical project, and he's still, I don't even remember what his rank was, but he's not in the admiral class where all of his peer groups, which typically in the military, you're kind of expected to go along with your peers in the officer rank. So usually, like in the Marine Corps, I can relate it to that. I mean, I've been around a lot of naval officers too, especially when I was enlisted, and then as an officer as well, naval and Army officers. But in the Marines especially, because you go to school, TBS with your peers, so you tend to rise with your peers. So usually, if you're a captain, then guys you went to TBS with, at the very minimum, you're gonna be a first lieutenant or a captain. And when you're all captains, you might have, after a year, somebody might pick up like a major, but then you're all captain, major, and then so on and so forth. And then some of you guys get out, and some of you guys don't get bumped up, so you get kind of forced out. But anyway, in this regard, Maverick hadn't made it, and it's mainly because he's a Maverick, and he does what he believes is right, and he's testing limits on things despite what the superiors are telling him. And to me, that was a great homage to the American spirit, and that's how it was supposed to be like. Because if you'll go in these organizations, and there'll be guys that they do rise up, and because they do the bare minimum, or they do what's expected of them. And the guys that real innovators, the guys that the troops really look up to, the guys that really change and make a difference are the guys that push the envelope, and that's what Maverick was doing. And he was lambasted and chewed out by admirals later on in the movie, and I could just see it. Like, this guy is the guy that they need. They don't want him. The the supervisory class, the admirals and whatnot, they despise him because he tests limits, because he does things that are American in a sense, and still lives by a code of honor and principles. They despise him for that, but people look up to him because of it. And these guys are forced to rely on him because he is that guy that will get things done when they need to be done. And it reminds me of this dynamic, if you've been in the military, of the field soldier or Marine, field Marine for my sake, and the garrison Marine. It's like there's a certain type of Marine, and yeah, he's not going to be good at promotion, but he's the guy that he innovates. He gets things done. He inspires people. And when push comes to shove, he's the guy that you want to rely on. And then you have the garrison types that are just doing it for a careerist type mentality. So I love that dynamic because Maverick is the American spirit, especially when it comes to certain things. It's pushing limits. It's not. It's defying, in a sense, authority in principle to do the right thing, and to lead and inspire those around you. Not only your peer groups, but the people that are entrusted upon you. And in the movie, you can tell that some of the times he's kind of clashing with himself on his leadership role, and the point where he wants to be part of this. He doesn't feel like he's training these people to do this, but at the same time, he doesn't want anybody else to lose their life. He wants to be the one leading the charge. And there's a lot of good leadership characteristics in the movie that are awesome. And it's just a pure Americana. It's great. It's a very refreshing movie to see. But that was a realistic deal there. And you can take all the jet stuff and whatnot that's realistic, and you can take some of the operational planning aspects of it that are fairly realistic. But then it is realistic, and it probably won't. If you talk to certain people in the military, they'll say, "Well, that's not really that realistic." The realism is, and what I picked out is that character that encompasses that American spirit. And there are people like that, and they typically don't even last as long as him. They typically get out, but they're the innovators, the guys that you want, the guys that inspire, that lead, that change things up and aren't towing the line just to get a new spot or a new career advancement. So overall, Maverick, just a great movie. I can't say anything. I wanted to actually, go in there, and I'm thinking how they screw this one up, because every other movie recently that has some kind of sequel or prequel, they've just screwed it up through whatever our culture's molding into. This one right here, I will say this because many movies and many events have inspired people to join the military or to better themselves in certain way. Oh, I have one other thing before we get into that. I'll say that, and then I'll say the last thing that's kind of like a realism. But anyway, that movie will be a recruiting tool, despite the fact that we have all of people getting out over the wokeness of the military. This movie probably saved, you can probably see the bump in numbers. It will save the military. Tom Cruise doesn't even realize what he's done. Not only has he produced such a great movie, but he's probably saved our military in a sense. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying from a recruiting perspective. You look at the numbers, what's coming out, and people getting out. It's horrific. This last couple of years. But this movie is changing people's lives. It's one of those movies that's going to inspire young men and women to join the service. I'm just saying that. All right. Last point. Some of the, you watching this movie, you see some of these naval aviators, and they look like, they're all alpha type. That's where you look in the military. Now, here's my Marine perspective on that as a Marine officer. There are a lot of Marine officers that look like those people. Not a whole lot of naval aviators, I'll tell you that. I remember, the Marine officer, one of the things is like you're supposed to be cool and never be a wussy. You're supposed to be everything that you want your Marines to be. You want them to look up to you. So you are supposed to be like top dog, alpha PT stud, and also a learned individual. and semi cocky, you know. But when I was around naval officers, they were more nerdy, especially even the pilots, even the naval aviators. They were more on the nerdy side as opposed to the marine aviators, who are more. I would put them like surfer cool guys. That was one of the things I noticed when I was when I was enlisted, and I was around marine officers in general, is they were always had that air of confidence and that cockiness that you see in that movie. And then the naval aviators were more like the nerds. I picture them, even though some of them were in shape, but I looked at them and it was like, man, some of them had weird mustaches, or they might be. I was like, maybe they're playing Dungeons and Dragons and in their rooms, I don't know, or whatever, Magic or something like that. But the Marine officers, they were always like super cool. And then when I became one, being around, I could see that mentality. Like, so you see those naval aviators in the bars or whatever there in the movie, and to me it's like, just take out the Navy part and put Marine officers, and you pretty much have that bravado that you see in there. So that's the last thing. But anyway, yeah, thank Tom Cruise he pretty much saved military recruiting for the next year or two. Or stop the bleeding of the military recruiting. Anyway, talk to you later.